And welcome back. We're going to go through the fallacies of oversimplification at this point. And the first set, fallacies of evasion, is really trying to get away from the actual topic. Oversimplification is where a student writer might look at a topic, but they're seeing it in black and white. So they're oversimplifying it. Anything that is a really large issue, there's not black and white. So it's not, it's this way or this way, and that's all it's ever going to be. What you want to do is you want to look at any attempt by a writer or speaker to ignore complexities. And a lot of times students do this because they don't have a lot of time to create the convincing argument that they should be. So they're going to simplify it down to something where it can kind of, be between a couple of choices. So within fallacies of oversimplification, we have a hasty generalization. And this is where you are jumping to a conclusion. It's a claim based on very little evidence, or sometimes on evidence that is not representative. So I've known 3 union representatives in my life. I wouldn't trust any of them. And there, I really am looking something that's unrepresentative. So there's lots of union reps across the country, and you've known 3 out of probably a few thousand. And that is why you're looking at it and saying, okay, that doesn't represent all of those union reps out there. Something like, I walked into class on the first day and the students were watching YouTube videos. This will be a very difficult semester. There, I have jumped to a conclusion based on very little evidence. Maybe the first day I walked and students were watching YouTube videos, but to kind of then make that connection and jump to the conclusion of, wow, this is going to be a terrible class, is committing a hasty generalization. So this is when we jump to a conclusion. We all do it, but you just want to make sure that you're not doing it when you're writing an essay. Then there's a sweeping generalization. In the first type, you're jumping. In this one, you're sweeping. So using absolute statements that are not supportable at all are what you want to avoid. People who live in St. Louis are unfriendly. All Republicans are crooks. There will never be a black female president. All of these are using absolute statements, and we're looking at things like all, we're looking at things like never. So if you do actually use a qualified statement, some people who live in St. Louis are unfriendly. Some Republicans are crooks. There may be a day where there is a black female president. Then you avoid sweeping everybody kind of into the same corner. And then there's oversimplification itself. This is also called a reductive fallacy. So depending on where you are, what book you're looking in, it can have one of those 2 terms. But this is where you're really simplifying cause and effect. And the causes or effects maybe are more complex than what you're indicating, or maybe they don't even exist. So poverty causes crime. Pornography is the reason there is violence against women. The problem with these is that you have oversimplified them to the point where someone's going to look at it and go, well, I know a lot of people who are in jail because they've committed crimes, but they weren't poor. I've known a lot of poor people that didn't, start to rob others. Same thing with pornography is the reason there's violence against women. That's really simplified that huge, huge issue of why women are abused in situations and people who are looking at pornography. So if I want to look at an aspect of one of those issues, I can, but I don't want to oversimplify it. Here's one I think is really a little bit easier to wrap your head around. So 9/11 happened because the Middle East hates Americans. yes, there were some people in the Middle East who really don't like Americans. However, to just say 9/11 happened because of that thing is oversimplifying that giant historical event, because yes, this was something that was evident, but there was a lot of other stuff that was going on as well. So don't make it too simple. Oh, look, there was another one. I didn't even know that. Students can't learn to write because they read too much online. Oh, that is simplifying it. If you're reading, actually, that's going to make you a better writer. So in this term, maybe I'm looking at it from that old school approach of you kids are on your computers too much. In that case, once again, I've simplified it because I have students who haven't written in years who do really well in my class. I also have students who are online probably way more than I am, who are also really good writers. Then we've got a post hoc fallacy. This is actually post hoc ergo propter hoc. It means after this, therefore, because of this, and it's wrongly assuming that because A preceded B, then A must have caused B to happen. So, in the 2 months since he took office, Mayor Holcomb has allowed crime to increase 2%. Or Miss Biggs gave us a quiz this morning because she was late to work. So, after this, therefore, because of this, we elect Mayor Holcomb. He goes into office in January. And by March, we've had an increase in crime by 2%. But post hoc means I'm going to look at those two things as directly related, which it wouldn't be. If Mayor Holcomb fired the entire police force and hadn't rehired anybody, yes, we could maybe make that connection. But it's just the idea that when he came in, suddenly crime was getting worse and there was no reduction in the police force. That's post hoc. Same thing with looking at an instructor maybe being late, or they got caught in the rain, and then they get to class and say, okay guys, here's a quiz. It doesn't necessarily mean that because the instructor was late, you guys get a quiz. It might be something that the instructor had already planned for, but just happened to be late that morning. Then there's something called an either or fallacy, and this one is really interesting because of the ways you will see it implemented. So this is assuming that a complicated question has only two answers. It's one good, one bad, both good, which most things obviously are not that simple. So city police officers are either brutal or corrupt. Well, we know that maybe they're neither. We know that some of them might be brutal. We know that some of them might be corrupt. But we're looking at it as it's either this or this, which we know is too simple to refer to in that way. And this is my favorite example. Oh, you guys can't see the very bottom word, but there was a man named Bertrand Russell. He was a British philosopher and all that other stuff. He was a very learned man, very smart man. And in the 50s, he said, either we must have war with Russia or they will conquer us. And what's interesting about that is in the time since he made that announcement, excuse me, Britain has not gone to war with Russia, and also Russia has not conquered Britain. So even though he was somebody who was very learned, he is making an error in logic here. And then a false analogy. A false analogy is a comparison that assumes a complete likeness between two elements in an argument. But just because they're similar in one respect, they may not be similar in all respects. So, baseball players shouldn't make millions of dollars because the president of the United States doesn't make that much money. And that sounds really good, because in that sense, what you're saying is the president is more important than a baseball player. However, the analogy doesn't necessarily work because baseball players and the president are paid in two completely different ways. Baseball players, it depends on the owner, the advertisers, the ticket sales, the merchandise sales. The president, theoretically, is paid by my tax dollars, and that's it. So I can't make those two equate as far as financial issues. And my favorite example of this one, though, was when a student wrote in an essay that Rend Lake College instructors should make more money because they're so important, but phrased it like baseball players shouldn't make millions because Miss Biggs doesn't make millions in her job. And I would love to make millions, but if I did, you guys probably couldn't afford tuition. So it's a false analogy because I can't equate those specific things in an argument. So there's also free medical care for all will work here because it works in England and Canada. Well, we're not England and we're not Canada. So we can perhaps someday have a free medical care proposal, but we can't just make that analogy with, well, it works in that country, so it should work for us, because obviously both of those countries have a different political system than we do. So that is all of the fallacies that you will have on the test. And if you do have any questions, just holler at me. And if you also have any issues with the test itself, let me know as soon as possible.